And welcome back to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor at whiskeypolitics.net. Great to have you back here at America's Voice News. You can also find us at YouTube. Click the subscribe button, and that way you get notified on all upcoming videos. And you can also listen to us in the car, on the hiking trail, wherever you like, on your podcast application of choice. iTunes, Google, Stitcher, and the Ricochet Audio Network. And if you're listening on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating and a comment. It helps others find us. You know, Apple and their algorithms. Not a lot of news this week as we're living in 2019 Trump world. I guess without getting into the details on obviously the Barr hearings and the whole idea that Spygate is now suddenly becoming real. And yes, there will be prosecutions. It is, in my opinion, and those that are have a much higher pay grade level than I in the government, that this is going to be a very slow unwrapping of a either gift if you are on the right, or a bag of dog poop on your door if you're on the left. That's probably going to take the next 18 months, probably walking us right up to 2020. There will be prosecutions. There will be a lot of embarrassed people. There will be a lot of egg on the face of a lot of media who are still doubling down. Now, all of a sudden, Barr is an idiot, or Barr is a toady, or I don't know. You know, listen, guys, keep doubling down. I think more of the independents that are out there that are watching this show are starting to wake up and realize that maybe they've been bamboozled. MSNBC and CNN ratings are definitely down after the Mueller report came out, and Barr gave us the summary. But, you know, listen, people, they're not going to give up. Okay, the left are not going to just double down. They're going to quadruple down. And they're going to ride this thing as hard as they can and, unfortunately, make idiots out of themselves in the process. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot of episodes that we're going to be discussing this in upcoming weeks. So stay tuned on all of this. But today I want to talk a little bit about our educational system in the United States. And, you know, we've had several discussions on this. One of my biggest frustrations right now, the seething anger and the rage that I am seeing with people in my generation who paid a few $100s a semester for college when they went through, and now seeing those same schools charging $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year for undergrad degrees, in some cases even more, are scratching their heads wondering what the heck has happened. How did they end up with this new normal? How did it happen? Well, we've had a couple of discussions on this over the past few weeks, but I guess more so from the standpoint of, you know, the good intentions that came out of Congress in the early 2000s, and how Congress essentially nationalized the student loans starting about 10 years ago. And the backing of these student loans with Sallie Mae and the ability for students, any student, to get a college loan has initially put more butts in the seats than there are seats. That's just supply and demand, something we've talked about here in the past, especially in the past several weeks. The reason that it's becoming so ubiquitous right now as far as a discussion goes on our show and others like us is because parents like me are starting to take a look at writing checks for the 2019-2020 college years, and standard state schools are now, with tuition and board, coming close to $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year, $75,000 a year. How are people doing this? I'm just asking, point blank. Give me a comment in the YouTube channel. How are you doing this without taking out $200,000 or $150,000 in student loans that your son or daughter is likely never to be able to pay back in full at the rate that, you know, we're seeing rates right now where people are spending a chunk of their take-home pay every single month. So if you've got a 25-year-old kid who graduated college a couple of years ago, that money, which should be going to real estate or investments or starting a business or starting a family, that's now going to paying off a student loan. And they're paying it as low as they can because they need to live. So how did this happen? How is it that we have state schools that are charging this kind of money? The Ivy League schools, you know, they are overfunded. And we're going to be talking about this afternoon on our podcast with our guest today, Adam Andrzejewski, who is, he's got some reports that have come out that is something that you obviously want to know. He's coming from a place called Open the Books, and he gets really into the data and the public access, which nobody talks about, of what the schools actually have in their coffers, and yet how they are still taking our tax dollars, which is paid mostly by the upper middle class taxpayers, trying to get their students through school, who are all ending up with massive student loans. The problem is that there is nobody right now in Congress that is willing to do anything about it or have the ability to do anything about it. If we're talking about folks that are in, let's say, the Financial Services Committee, let's say maybe, who's leading that right now? Maxine Waters, Congresswoman from Compton, Southern California, who has been indicted a number of times herself on some financial issues over the years, probably one of the most corrupt members of Congress. She's overseeing the Financial Services Committee, which is on its own probably a story that we can do a whole episode on. But here she is. You probably didn't see this. This may have not made your local breaking news. Talking to the heads of the banks to berate them on the student loans. Check this out.
Thank you. Today there are more than 44 million Americans that owe, this is student loan crisis, 1.56 trillion in student loan debt. Last month, this committee received testimony that last year 1 million student loan borrowers defaulted, which is on top of the 1 million borrowers who defaulted the year before. What are you guys doing to help us with the student loan debt? Who would like to answer first? Mr. Monahan, Big Bank.
We stopped making student loans in 2007 or so.
Oh, so you don't do it anymore, Mr. Corbett?
We exited student lending in 2009.
Oh, no!
Mr. Diamond?
When the government took over student lending in 2010 or so, we stopped doing all student lending.
Thank you. What about small business?
Oh my goodness, this lady is dumb as a bag of James Brown wigs. I mean, how is she, first of all, a member of Congress, first of all? Secondly, she's leading the Financial Services Committee, talking with the bankers, the guys that are leading the largest banks in this country, trying to berate them. Lady, do your job. Get a little bit of research done before you sit down and make a fool out of yourself. This is insane. But, okay, what she said leading up to this is right. We've got 1.7 billion, trillion with a T, $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. And it's estimated that approximately 17 to 20%, depending upon which poll you look at, is going to default. Who's paying that back? Who's paying those tens of billions of dollars back when the students default on loans they should have never had been given in the first place? Many of those students shouldn't have gone to college in the first place. The only reason they were able to go to college, no matter whether the student loan was for $20,000 or $50,000 a year, is because they got a loan. Goes back to supply and demand. Because you get a student loan, you can now go to school. Yeah, Dave, but what about all the students that want to go to school that can't afford it? Absolutely right. There's issues with the price of education. You pull out the government who is backing these student loans, pull them out altogether. The loans will not be made at the level that they're being made right now. And guess what? Tuition is going to have to all come down because market forces, this is called simple supply and demand, folks. Econ 101. We're not learning it anymore in our schools. But when students are not going to be applying to all of these schools, there's less students applying, less butts in the seats. They're going to have to lower tuition and everybody's going to have to do it. And maybe some of those big schools with those massive endowments can take care of their own students. We're going to talk a lot about this. I want to get into all of this right now. This is infuriating. Not only the issue, the problem that has been government made, but by the people that are supposedly solving it, Maxine Waters. So we're going to talk a lot more about this. OpenTheBooks.com, Adam Andrzejewski, who is going to be joining us here upcoming shortly. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Dave Sussman here. Whiskey Politics. Follow us at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and America's Voice News along with YouTube. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Whiskey Politics. Dave Sussman, your purveyor and host at whiskeypolitics.net. And again, don't forget to subscribe to us at YouTube. Find us at America's Voice News. All of your podcast applications, including the Ricochet Audio Network and iTunes. Make sure you give us that 5-star rating. So talking a little bit about what's going on in our state of higher education today. Delighted to have with us from openthebooks.com and Andrzejewski. Hopefully I got that right.
That was great. Yeah, no problem, Dave. That's fantastic.
Fresh
it's
off
not
the hills.
Easy, right?
No, well, you listen. I always say that you can call me whatever you want, just not late to dinner. So,
well,
fresh off the hills from your interview with Tucker Carlson on Fox News. Congratulations on that. It was great segment for you. So, for folks that are just learning a little bit about you, tell us what is openthebooks.com.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share on your platform, Dave. So openthebooks.com, I founded it. I'm the CEO. We have a simple mission to post every dime online in real time. Last year, our team of auditors filed 60,000 Freedom of Information Act requests on every single substantial government body in this country. For the first time ever, in December, we went live with 22 million public employees' salary and pension records. Every single month, every single quarter, we deliver oversight reports on tranches of federal data. And one of those reports we launched last week, which we're talking about on your podcast today, and that is in regard to our oversight of the United States Department of Education.
And what are you seeing thus far? What are your results showing?
So I think the top line of our findings at the Department of Education, specific to a focus on higher education, is that the sheer amount and largesse of public support for higher ed has actually driven the price of tuition upwards. For example, I think this phenomenon is most easily seen within our colleges of cosmetology, our beauty schools. So you've got the largest provider, the largest chain of beauty schools, Empire Beauty Schools. They're now charging tuition up to $22,000, $28,000 for a 35-week program where you get a license to cut hair, manicure nails, and do massage therapy. And last year, over the course of the last 4 years, they took over $500 million worth of United States taxpayer federal student aid payments.
Okay, so two things. First of all, you're talking about cosmetology schools, and I think if I read your report correctly, you're also talking about massage or masseuse schools as well that are doing this.
So Empire, I mean, you get a, they do classes for licensure in all of those verticals.
Okay, so and they first of all, they're charging the equivalent of a very high-end university's charging now. My son is about to go to school next year. I'm looking at $50,000 tuition per year. So you're not, I mean, this is insanity what you're talking about. And but how is it funded by the taxpayer? Are we talking student loans? What?
So every student that qualifies gets a student loan package, right? Gets a financial aid package. It's comprised of Pell Grants, other grants, student loans. And so then as a student, you're able to take that to accredited higher ed, universities, colleges, to spend that money where you choose. These students, they're interested in cutting hair. They're interested in a beauty college. And so the largest player in this space, this Empire Beauty Schools, because of that sheer amount of taxpayer funded support, they're able to charge, and students then pay and are loaded up on student debt. They're able to get away with tuition of up to $22,000 a year. Now, we took a look at the Big Ten college universities. Obviously, there's 12 of them. And on in-state college tuition at a Big Ten school, only Northwestern, only their tuition exceeds $22,000 a year.
The Big Ten schools.
Right.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking about apples and oranges here as far as the level of education, but the cost sounds like it's the same.
Well, and that's where these beauty schools, when they get that federal support, if students had to pay this on their own without public support, then tuition rates would obviously drop with the grants, which is free money, doesn't have to be paid back, or with these loans. That's when these beauty schools charge a lot of money. We see it in other areas, like there's a drama and art academy based in New York City, in Los Angeles. They charge between $38,000 and $48,000 a year in tuition, and they admit that their average graduate comes out and makes $28,000 a year. We actually took a look at U.S. Department of Education statistics amongst beauty school graduates, going back to the beauty schools. By the age of 30, the average wages of a beauty school graduate is $19,000.
So that's the annual wage, and it's double what they're what they're making in a year just to get that education. What's the default rate right now on those student loans?
So across the entire continuum, the Department of Ed admits that out of the lending in 2018, and $100 billion went out the door in terms of lending in 2018 on student loans. It's a tremendous amount of money. 1 out of every 4 of those loans at some point over its lifetime will default.
So 25%.
It's 24% of the loans the Department of Ed is saying will default. 28% of the students in college now with loans don't even know they have loans. And this is particularly disturbing. There's no truth in lending requirements at many of these universities, and so the universities entitle these loans as awards, and the students don't even know, according to a Brookings Institution report, the students don't even know that they have to pay it back.
How is that possible? I mean, to sign a loan, you got to sign your name on a lot of dotted lines, right?
Yeah, I did when I was in school, that's for sure. I knew I had to pay the money back, but I guess, Brookings, they did the study and they said 28% of students don't even realize they have to pay it back. I guess they have a mix of loans and grants. It's entitled awards, and so they're in the dark about it.
I mean, that's incredible to me. So not only are you providing loans for kids to graduate school or a class of some kind, a certification, I guess, if you're talking about hairdressers and masseuses or whatever they may be, and they're going out, if they get a job, they're making 20 grand a year. They've got $40,000 in education grants and loans and things they have to pay back. And how are they? I guess I'm just really confused by this, because when you graduate, you know that you've paid for a certification. You have to start making payments, right? Does it come directly out of their paychecks, or?
No, I think student loans, you cut a check every single month. There's different types. Each of the different types of student loans has a different payback period. Each of them have different terms, and then you have to follow that schedule. Here's the other thing that we identified, Dave, that the U.S. Department of Education admits, that over the course of the last 2 years, they admit they've overpaid to the tune of $11 billion student loans and Pell Grants. It's 4% of all student loans have been overpaid, and 8% of all Pell Grants. As you know, Pell Grants don't have to be paid back. It's 1 out of every $12 in Pell Grants that's actually overpaid.
What do you mean overpaid?
They deliver more money than what the student should have received. It's an improper payment, self-identified, admitted to by the United States Department of Education. Furthermore, they forecast for 2019 that the amount of improper payments will actually rise. So this is a great nonpartisan reform. Improper payments at the Department of Education and other 20 large federal agencies have been going on a long time, through Democratic administrations, through Republican administrations. But it's high time we get some basic in-house financial controls over at the Department of Education to stop the billions of dollars leaving the store.
Okay. I want to get more into this. I want to get deeper into all of this and also find out what some of the things that can be done. We have Adam Andrzejewski with we have openthebooks.com. Check out this website, folks. We're going to talk a lot more about this right after the break. Dave Sussman here at Whiskey Politics. We'll be right back. And Dave Sussman back with you at Whiskey Politics. And again, check us out at YouTube and all of your favorite podcast applications and America's Voice News. We have Adam Andrzejewski, who is with openthebooks.com. Great site that really kind of details a lot of information here that most people are not seeing in our mainstream news. Adam, you're getting a voice out. You've done a lot of work. You've also done some work with Manhattan Institute, correct?
Well, we have. We delved into the pay and pensions over at the New York, New Jersey Port Authority a couple of years ago, and some great pieces were written by Judith Miller for the New York Post, for Manhattan Institute's own City Journal, and Stephen Malenga, which made some major editorials across the country. The findings were pretty significant. We had employees of the New York, New Jersey Port Authority getting greater first-year pensions than they had ever earned on their highest salary years.
Yeah, that's got to. When I start taking a look at all of that, and we going down that rabbit hole of pensions and employee benefits for being a government worker, the whole idea that we all grew up with, and that is, if you want to make real money, you go into the private sector. If you want a nice, safe, cushy $40,000 a year job and get your gold watch after 35, 40 years, go into public sector. It's completely the reverse now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that was the mental contract. I mean, my dad taught for 37 years in 7th and 8th grade history and civics, and he made less as he went for the promise of a nice golden handcuff pension at the end of the day. And now what we find in our data at openthebooks.com, with 22 million public employees' salaries posted on our website, it's virtually every single public employee's salary at every level of government across this entire country, federal, state, and local. What we find is they're making the bank as they go on current employment. There are, we took a look at the 100,000 six-figure public employees, and there's almost 2 million of them at every level of government across the entire country. So they're making it as they go, and they get that big pension at the end of their careers.
Yeah, you have this broken down on your website. It's like breaking news, flashing siren, that you've got 2 million. So first and foremost, let me ask you, let's kind of backtrack a little bit here. How did you, first of all, get started with this idea of making all this information transparent?
So we're headquartered in Illinois. My family in Illinois, my mother's side, goes back 8 generations when we settled the family farm in 1844. So I think anybody that lives in Illinois, or has certainly read the news headlines about Illinois, understands that this state is the Super Bowl of corruption. So my father ran against, when I was in the 2nd grade and the 4th grade, one of the most corrupt Illinois politicians in state history, and that actually means something. My dad ran against George Ryan for state representative in 1976 and 1978. Sure. And Ryan eventually became governor, and he was one of those governors in Illinois. At one point, 4 out of the last 9 governors had spent time in prison. Ryan, actually, the Republican, was in prison at the same time Democrat Rod Blagojevich was in prison. My father tried to take him out of his political career in the late 1970s. Obviously, Ryan won that race, but this instilled in me the nobility of true public service. And I thought if I could ever insulate myself with some private sector entrepreneurial success, that was my true love, was public policy and politics. I identified transparency as that silver bullet, both for my state and the country at large. And starting in 2011, we embarked on this unique mission to capture and post online every dime taxed and spent at every level in this country, and then give it oversight. And that's what brings us together here today, you and I, David.
You call this the transparency revolution. Is there a demand? Is there a pent-up demand for this type of transparency? What are you hearing from the marketplace on this?
So I think the American people are always underestimated. They want to know where their tax dollar goes. They want to be able to follow every single dime of their tax dollar and see who's receiving what for what service or for what job. And at openthebooks.com, that's what we do. We display that locally so regular people can see where their tax dollars are going and who's receiving it, and so they can go to public meetings and hold their political class accountable for tax and spend decisions. There's a watchdog group in Illinois that, using our data as a start, They've pioneered a watchdog model, and they've forced out nearly 400 local and elected officials who have fled their posts in the face of aggressive transparency and questioning. And that needs to happen all over this country.
When you say they've fled their posts, 400 politicians in just the state of Illinois?
In the last 5 years, this watchdog group has forced out, they have a database, a line-by-line database. It's entirely accurate and vetted. 60 Minutes followed these guys for 45 days with their cameras and vetted their database. There's been nearly 400 Illinois public officials who have fled their post or been indicted or fired because of this watchdog group's work.
That's like 7 or 8 a month just in the state of Illinois. What are you seeing across the country? I mean, this is obviously not just in your state.
Well, it's a target-rich environment. Everywhere we look, we've never investigated a public agency or a public body and found it running well. Now, look, this is not new news. It's been with us since the founding of the country. You know, the founders knew the power of transparency. They wrote it into the United States Constitution. It's Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7, the Powerful Appropriations Clause. And most people don't even know it exists. And it says that a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public monies shall be published from time to time. That means the books are open. That means publish every dime online in real time. This is our constitutional right as we the people. We have to hold them accountable. And at openthebooks.com, that's our mission.
What are some of the most outrageous examples that you guys have seen?
So I investigated my local junior college back in 2014, and we found that they used an impress style of slush fund accounting to hide $100 million, that only the president of the school and the chairman of the board of trustees knew the details on $100 million. They actually spent $250,000 on wine and wine accessories and tagged that as instructional supplies. They paid for the president's country club dues out of that slush fund. The chief radio station engineer opened up his own company, traded with his own company, unbeknownst to the school accountants, mostly out of that fund, to the tune of $500,000. When we showcased this twice on the front page at the Chicago Tribune, he was indicted by the local prosecutor. He pled guilty. He was forced to pay restitution of $400,000. He's serving 8 years in the penitentiary, and he lost his public retirement pension.
Good for you. I mean, you know, that's obviously a great result. I think a lot of people outside of Illinois just look at Illinois in the same way they probably look at California or New York and just shake their head. And one of the reasons is it's almost it's almost at the level where there's nothing that could be done. Is the beast just too big? Is it too big of a behemoth? Or do you think, you know, something like what you guys are doing right now can turn the tide?
Well, it can definitely turn the tide. Just with the local Fox affiliate in Chicago, WFLD, Fox 32 News, we did an oversight investigation just last fall of the supersized salaries within Illinois K through 12 education. And what we investigated was the #1 all-time most highly compensated Illinois educator. He was a superintendent in a very small district who earned $407,000 a year. We knew, Dave, he was going to retire on Halloween. And before he retired, we filed a Freedom of Information Act request wanting to know his accumulated sick and vacation days because he was going to get paid out on those. And he represented 561 of those days, and at his daily pay rate, we thought it was outrageous that he was going to ask for a cash check out the door of $750,000. When the reporter presented this at the board meeting, they all started looking at each other because he had asked them for a cash check out the door of $1.72 million. So rather than allowing him to retire, they fired him too.
And what happened to his pension and the money's owed?
Well, that's still being investigated. To the extent that there was law breaking, we hope he's indicted.
Okay. Wow. You know, this is incredible. Going to get a lot more into this with you. It's fascinating, and it definitely is right for the time right now. I think there definitely needs to be a lot more introspection by government into some of the, I mean, you know, the budgets are just ever increasing, as you said, on both sides. We'll be right back after the break. We have Adam Andrzejewski, who is with openthebooks.com. I'm Dave Sussman. We'll be right back after the break. And welcome back, Whiskey Politics. Final segment here with Adam Andrzejewski, who is with openthebooks.com. Everybody needs to check out this site. It's fascinating, and you've got a lot of different kinds of reports on there, Adam. You know, one of the things, going back to what we initially started talking about here, in reference to the level of accountability that we're seeing regarding education and student loans, and you were talking about cosmetology schools and the like, which is an incredible story just on its own right. But we have a situation right now in this country where there is almost $2 trillion in student loan debt that exists out there. And I know this is something that you've talked about. It's something that we've really hit hard on our show with certain guests as well, because, you know, as somebody, I'm on the, you know, Generation X, on the older end of Generation X, we are now being saddled with, as I mentioned to you, 40, 50,000, 60. My son was looking at school $75,000 a year. I just can't do it. Okay. And so a lot of this is stemming from what I believe is this balloon in student loans, which is government based. What is your understanding of how this massive tsunami of debt has occurred in the past 10 years? Where does it stem from? And what are we looking at here with this thing? Is it realistic that this stuff is ever going to get paid off?
No, I don't think it is realistic. Let's just look at the scope of the problem. Student loan debt at $1.7 trillion now eclipses America's credit card debt, which is about $1 trillion, and auto loan debt, which is about $1.1 trillion. So this is a massive problem. And higher education is once again, Dave, proving the rule that the fastest way to make something expensive is for Washington, D.C. politicians to throw a lot of our money, a lot of public money at the problem to make it affordable. And now we see this in higher education with the programs of good intentions, all of this student aid flooding the market, which allows the colleges to increase the price of tuition. For example, we found when we were putting together our oversight report on higher ed, we found that the 25 schools with the largest endowments, now how much money do they have? They have nearly all the money in the world. They've got over $250 billion of money in the bank, money in their endowments. $272 billion these colleges have in their endowment funds. They don't need our money. They don't need public money. You know, we took a look at the Ivy League. The Ivy League has $120 billion in their endowments, and that's the equivalent of providing free student tuition for the next 51 years with no further gifting. So these 25 schools with $250 billion in the bank, they took last year $7 billion in federal subsidies. And that's only on the student aid packages. And they didn't need the public, you know, working class and middle class taxpayers to help fund their student body. They could have done it out of their endowments. They need to lighten the load on the American taxpayer. These wealthy colleges must make themselves affordable.
How did this come around? Because, you know, again, not to age myself, when I went to school, my first semester for my undergrad education anyway was just under $300. It grew from there, but I don't think it was more than $1,500 by the time I graduated per semester. That same school today is $40 grand a year. How did this evolve? Who were the powerful forces that created this?
So I think that you know, the lobby within higher education is very powerful. We took a look at the 8 schools of the Ivy League over a 5-year period, and they spent tens of millions of dollars on lobbying Congress. So the big players get to write the rules, and I'll tell you right now, what was particularly striking to our auditors at openthebooks.com when we put together this oversight report on higher ed, what was particularly striking is the only people winning are the colleges themselves. They're the ones making out like bandits. They have literally gamed the system on the backs of taxpayers, on the back of the students and their families and their futures and the American dream. For instance, there are now 43,000 public employees in higher education that make more than $200,000 a year. They've literally gamed the system for personal gain.
I just want to make sure for our audience that may be listening to this in their car, if you haven't crashed your car yet, folks, say that statistic again.
There, at our data at openthebooks.com, there's 43,000 public employees at the government colleges and universities that make more than $200,000 a year. Now, specific to the Ivy League, there's 147 employees in the 8 schools of the Ivy League that make more than $400,000. There's 47 of them that make more than $1 million a year, and 5 of them, over the course of the last 5 years, have individually cleaned off more than $20 million of compensation. If you just take a look at 3 job titles in the 8 schools of the Ivy League, that's the president of the school, the chief information officer, and the chief financial officer. Those 3 positions at the Ivy League in the last 5 years cleaned off, incredibly, $210 million.
This is insanity. And you're telling us that these schools, which are getting taxpayer subsidies, mostly by middle-class people, folks like myself who are struggling figuring out how I'm going to put my kid through school. I got 2 sons, so it's, double. That they've got $250 billion in endowments just sitting there gathering interest probably faster than they can spend it, and they're relying upon us. What's going on here? How did this happen? So,
we took a look at some of the history on this, and all the way back to 2008, he's currently the Senate Judiciary Chairman, Chuck Grassley, the senator from Iowa. So starting in 2008, on the Higher Ed Senate committee, he had bipartisan support. He'd reached across the aisle with his Senate colleagues, and they had identified this problem in the wealthy schools. They asked the question, what is the public purpose argument for these wealthy schools to compel taxpayers to pay the freight for their students when they could pay the tuition through their own networks, through their own endowments, through their own wealth? So we're still faced with this situation today. There was a slight reform at the end of 2017 when the Republicans passed a minuscule tax on excessive endowments at these schools. They didn't cut their payments. If I was sitting there, I'd have cut their payments. But they decided to tax them on the increases of their gains of the excessive endowments, and it was only a 1.4%, like I say, minuscule tax on their gains. They should have cut their payments rather than increase their taxes.
Who funded the lobby, and who is the lobbying group for this? Grassley just didn't pass this because of altruism.
No, so I think these schools, these wealthy schools, they hire the lobbyists to lobby Congress. And it's a significant block. And they're pouring, like I said, tens of millions of dollars just in the 8 schools of the Ivy League to lobby Congress. And that doesn't even include your Notre Dames, your Northwesterns, your Stanfords, your University of Southern California, University of Michigan. I mean, all these other wealthy schools. They're also hiring lobbyists to write the rules in their own favor.
And so, okay, and what we're seeing on, this is kind of a side issue right now, but this whole thing, we're trying to game the system, that schools are so hard to get into now, and I put that to supply and demand, because if everybody can get a student loan, there's more butts than there are seats. I think that's just Econ 101, which is unfortunately not being taught these days. And colleges can charge more and more and more every single year because anybody can get a student loan. So we see things like this, what's her name? The Full House lady, Lachlan, whatever her name is, spending $500,000 to get her daughter, who's too stupid to get into a school to begin with. She should have nothing to do with the school, but it's a brand. She, is looking for status, right? So she gets her daughter into USC by spending $500,000 or bribing $500,000. That's not the purpose of this discussion here, but you're starting to see, kind of these causalities that come out from a system like this, aren't we?
Absolutely. And everyone's rightfully angry about those wealthy and well-connected parents who cheated their kids into those elite schools. But we make the argument at openthebooks.com that the real scandal is the cost of education, the amount of our money being thrown at these schools, which is driving up tuition. And I want to give you an example of this. Last year, the Department of Education admits that they doled out $100 billion worth of student loans. And they also admit the American taxpayer's stake when the loan was originated was 17%. The loss right off the top, because we were subsidizing these low interest rate loans, the loss off the top to the American taxpayer was $17 billion. So look, Dave, you and I, we've got a big stake in this issue. We need to raise our voice. We need to call our member of Congress to common sense reforms right off the bat. These wealthy schools need to lighten the load on the American taxpayer, and out of their own networks, out of their own endowments, they need to create the funds and not depend on public support. Second reform is that these improper payments, the billions of dollars worth of overpaid student loans and Pell Grants, that practice needs to stop. And I don't care if you're a Democrat, a progressive, a conservative, a libertarian, an independent, everybody can agree on that.
Yeah, but Adam, that means that kids aren't going to be able to get their loans to go to schools, and we're going to cause kids not to become educated. I mean, that's going to be the argument, isn't it?
Well, I just don't think it passed muster. I don't think that argument holds up in the crucible of public debate. I think the issues that we've identified here, especially these two issues about wealthy schools and stopping improper payments, probably public support runs in the 80th percentile or north of there.
Yeah, well, you're certainly seeing probably not a lot of tears over the folks that are being indicted right now of this college cheating scandal or the admission cheating scandal. So you're talking about these reforms. Okay, what is it that you guys are specifically doing? And my second point to this question, last question for you here, we've got a couple minutes left, is what can we do as a populace?
So, I mean, what we do at openthebooks.com is we open it up and we shine the bright light on where the problems are. Here's another area that we identified. And it's amongst the junior colleges. These are the schools that serve the strivers, the students that have two jobs. They're eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and ramen noodles, and they want a leg up. They want to get a good education. Wallet Hub scored the worst 50 of those schools. And then we took those schools and we quantified last year, the American taxpayer on federal subsidies put $1 billion into those failing junior colleges. The accreditation standards need to be tightened. This is another bipartisan reform that we, the people, need to call our member of Congress, raise our voice, and insist on these things.
Accountability.
Absolutely.
So you're talking about what? Testing scores? What?
So Wallet Hub used a variety of different factors. People can come to openthebooks.com. When you download our report, we have a link to how Wallet Hub determined the scores for these 50 worst performing junior colleges. Our role in this was to take those 50 schools and match up their federal funding, which amounted last year to $1 billion.
Jeez, it's insanity, isn't it?
The top 10 of those schools had a graduation rate of 12%. So the students aren't
graduated.
Yes, the students aren't graduating, but they're loaded up on student loan debt, and now that's going to impact their future and their family's future for decades to come.
They're better off going to the cosmetology school.
I'm not sure about that. I don't know how you cut hair, do massage, do nails, and pay back $10,000 worth of student loans.
Yeah, this whole thing is insane, and unfortunately, good folks like you, there's few out there doing what you're doing. So that's why we wanted to highlight what you guys are doing out there. I think it's definitely needed and can play an important role in, at least at this stage, furthering the discussion that needs to be had, because people are getting just absolutely slaughtered with these payments. And I don't know what the options are today other than to take out student loans if you can't come up with, I'm gonna have to come up with $600,000 by the time it's all said and done for my two kids. Who has that kind of money just sitting there? I don't care what savings you have. Anyway, this is all good stuff. Adam, thank you so much again. Folks can find you where?
So our website is openthebooks.com, Facebook, open_the_books.
Great. We'll put your links up in the liner notes under this, and greatly appreciate you taking the time. Continue doing what you're doing, and I think it's really important work, so thank you.
Dave, thanks for having me on your program.
My pleasure. And folks, we'll be back again real soon at Whiskey Politics with another episode. Again, very special thanks to Adam Andrzejewski over at Open the Books, and we'll be back soon. Talk to you later. Cheers.